Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it first to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram as Spartan Grown, all one word with no spaces, or you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com, and I can help you with all your cannabis growing questions there.
Happy to have you back. And next up, we've got Dr. MJ.
Hello. Yes, I'm still getting myself situated here, but I am Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. And yeah, looking forward to a new show.
And short panel so far this week. Noah the Grower said he'll be here a little bit late, and we've got Brandon Russ isn't going to make it. Maybe a few others missing. But with that being said, going to pass it next to Matthew Gates.
Yeah, hey everyone, Matthew Gates. I just published that video I talked about earlier about hemp resistance to budworms. So you can check that out on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol. And yeah, I'm excited because we might be talking about another research report today or something else. Who knows?
Definitely research today. So we're going to be talking about the scientific articles that we discussed. You teased a little bit the first one last week about, I believe it's CBD uptake in the blood across a few different oils. So I think we could start off with that one. And then the other one that you shared with our group chat was sort of about aromatic profiles, sort of looking at smell outside of just terpenes. They were looking at like esters, aldehydes, and other things in there as well. So I think we could get to that one second, and we'll see how it goes from there. But yeah, I think maybe we'll start off with the CBD article if you have it available. I believe you should be able to share screen. It says multiple participants can share simultaneously. So otherwise, I can go into my Instagram chat and pull up the link.
Yeah, I am going to get that, but I don't remember the title actually. So if you can give that to me, or I can find it, I suppose. You're going to need a stall for me.
Vegetable oils composition affects the intestinal lymphatic transport and systemic bioavailability of co-administered lipophilic drug cannabidiol.
Let's see.
And I've got the Science Direct link. I guess I could share the screen, or I could drop it in the Zoom chat if you want to take the control there and share the screen. But Control V, boom, there's the Science Direct article. And I'm also going to share that over on the live chat or view all messages on YouTube for people who are curious to check out the link for themselves. So I just dropped that link to Science Direct on YouTube for anybody who's listening with us live right now. Sorry for a little bit of a slow roll in the startup. We also have a amazing panelist joining us in just a few moments, the American one. I'll introduce him as soon as he gets connected. Cheers. Tao, are you with us?
Yes, I am. How are you doing?
Doing well. You want to go ahead and give your introduction, and then Matthew will start us off with the CBD paper.
Sure. I am the American one on YouTube and the American one _ Keens on the IG. And if you have any questions or want to hit me up about anything, it's probably easiest there. And yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, well then, yeah, the title, like Jack said, vegetable oils composition affects the intestinal lymphatic transport and systemic bioavailability of co-administered lipophilic drug cannabidiol. So interesting. I didn't go through all this in great detail. I actually didn't know if we would be going over this one today. I did think we would go over the other one though, which will be really cool. Everyone's talking about it, it seems like, so it's very popular right now. Not to build up too much, but the graphics are cool, which is one of the reasons why I thought it would make for a good article for us. But this one, basically, well, it says it already, and it said actually olive oil was the oil that was best for the cannabidiol or CBD uptake. And I'm going to try something different and not be super dry and like go over the whole abstract necessarily, unless we want to do that. How does the panel feel about that?
I'm curious if there was like any significant, like, was there one that was super low and had lower uptake levels? Was the, I see coconut oil, I think is another one being tested, olive oil, peanut oil, soybeans, sesame. I'm curious what the lowest one was and how much higher the best oil was than the other comparable oils.
Yeah, so here we have a graphic for this, the figure 1. And it looks like, as you can see, the first one, A, olive is highest. And this is for recovered CBD percent in the oil phase. And coconut is the lowest, it looks like. Actually, several of them are pretty similar. Sesame. So the full gamut is olive, peanut, soybean, sunflower, sesame, and coconut. And in that descending order seem to be the recovered CBD percent for those who aren't watching this on YouTube.
It's interesting to me because I know coconut oil is probably one of the more commonly used ones, and it's even praised for being quite effective. Even like maybe, I don't know if the distinction between MCT or multi-chain triglyceride, I think is MCT oils that come from coconut oil are different or the same categorization as coconut oil, but I do see that one commonly used. So I'm curious if the other ones have more beneficial uptake for CBD, if the CBD folks out there will start to move towards the other oils.
Well, I was wondering if we are assuming, or is it known that THC is equally, dissolved or whatever, infused into these oils, the same as CBD? Do we know this? Anyone? Because I don't know.
I would say that they're not the same.
I don't think it would be. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Because there's just not much
Question.
evidence to support two different chemicals would have the same properties just because they came from the same plant. It's typically like melting points, boiling points, things like that are often quite different.
Different. Yeah.
Across chemicals.
Okay. Very good.
Now I will say that, yeah, it's a good question. Also one that I probably can't answer for 100%, but I do agree with that. And also another thing that I'm not so sure of because I lack the background here. But so we have 3 different phases in this table, in this figure: oil phase, aqueous phase, and sediment phase. And we can see actually it's kind of reversed somewhat. Coconut is the recovered CBD percentage was higher here in C for coconut oil, but it's in this sediment phase. I don't really know what that means, to be honest. But that's what it says. Does anyone else know what it means? Because I don't.
No, I'm not familiar with like oil research like this.
I would
I
go up to the methods and then check out the definitions for oil phase, aqueous phase, and sediment phase. I think that sediment phase maybe would be referring to like flour or still, biological material, I guess, versus like aqueous and oil are kind of what they sound like. Oil is an oil, aqueous is dissolved into a liquid. Sediment, I would imagine there's some sort of
oil and water. Is that what you mean?
Well, they're separate.
Yeah, I'm not
like,
entirely sure, but I don't know, Jack.
I don't know about that. I can take a look. We have this here too, which might be a little. Is this just all those aggregated? CBD concentration in nanograms per milliliter over time. Oh, this is from This is from plasma. So I guess this is from.
If it's from plasma, that's just the blood test results, right?
That's right. That is what I interpret to be the case. So they all decrease over time, which makes sense. Yeah, let's check out the methods. Let's see what's going on there. Or maybe even the introduction.
Yeah, it seems like it's like maybe they tested a sample of the oil when it was still steeping in the plant material, and they're calling that sediment phase. And liquid phase is after the plant material is filtered out, and that's the liquid phase. What was the third phase?
Sediment.
Oil.
Aqueous, oil, and sediment.
Aqueous. That tends to make me think
That's like the water phase.
Why would they add
Yeah.
water?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that
I don't
means,
know.
really.
We're learning together on this one, chat. We're going through. We're gonna figure it out. But it's interesting because it's okay. We honestly going through these types of research articles and finding the information that we're looking for can educate and inform people who haven't done this type of research and gone through these types of articles. And understanding the definitions that are used is important because what we might think is oil or aqueous or sediment might be completely right or completely wrong. Like I'm expecting to, when we get to this, definition, potentially be just wrong with what my initial thought was.
Well, I'd rather be as little wrong as possible. So let's do the quick hack for people who don't read a lot of research reports. You go to the conclusion first. Anyone who took the SATs knows that's how you get the questions right first. You look at the questions first, and then you read the paragraph, not the reverse. Anyways, it says in the study, 6 different natural vegetable oils were evaluated as lipid vehicles to facilitate the intestinal lymphatic transport and oral bioavailability of a lipophilic model drug CBD. Fatty acid composition in oils and corresponding lymph chylomicrons, which I don't know what those are, following oral administration of lipids was assessed. According to fatty acid analysis and in vivo studies, coconut oil-based formulation has higher MCT content than other oils, which leads to lower lymphatic transport and systemic bioavailability of CBD in comparison to other lipid-based formulations. So I'll stop there. What do we think about that?
I don't think it answers our earlier question, but I think that's interesting. So they're basically saying that the coconut oil is maybe a sub-ideal oil for dissolving cannabinoids.
Which is funny because the exact reason they gave is why many people choose it is because the high MCT. But
yeah,
use another research hack. I used Control F or find in my browser, and I pulled up the article real quick. And it says, as a result, 3 distinct layers were obtained. The top layer, parentheses, undigested lipid phase, the middle layer, aqueous, micellar phase, and the bottom layer, sediment phase. The 3 layers were separated and analyzed for CBD and TG concentrations.
So if you've ever made canna butter, you've got, when you like chill it after you've dissolved it, you're going to have the fat at the top. You're going to have a lot of water as the next layer, and then there's going to be sludge at the bottom. And that's literally then what they're describing as the oil phase is going to be that top layer of the separation. The aqueous is going to be the water layer, basically, that still has some things dissolved into it, and then the sediment. Now, if you're making an oil, you're going to want as much of it transferred into the oil and as little left in the water and in the sediment as possible. So if we went back to that first chart, I think that just sort of is why coconut oil had a lot sort of still left in the sediment and not nearly as much in the oil.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm going to bebop down to it afterwards, because that was a great way to describe that. I think you've demystified it. The rest of the conclusion says that in contrast, sesame and olive oil vehicles led to higher CBD concentrations in lymphatic tissues and systemic circulation than other natural vegetable oils. This is most likely due to the fact that sesame and olive oils contain higher proportion of oleic and linoleic acids, which are known to promote intestinal lymphatic transport. Okay, interesting. So there's already some precedent for that, which is neat. However, sesame oil has higher variability of CBD absorption in comparison to olive oil, most probably because it is more prone to oxidation due to higher linoleic acid content. Okay. Therefore, olive oil could be a recommended lipid carrier candidate for CBD and potentially other lipophilic drugs to enhance intestinal lymphatic transport and bioavailability following oral administration. So that's pretty cool. And that means that this can be relevant for other things too, which is always nice.
I'm really curious I know this would be answered in a different research article on a different day. But what Tao was asking is, like, what if for THC, coconut oil is very effective or something? You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe it's not effective for CBD, but maybe it's extremely effective for THC. So I'm going to try and do a little Googling real quick to see if there's any research that's been done on different oils, uptake, bioavailability, THC.
I do feel like it's nice to know this kind of research, because it's something where somebody might make a faddish decision, like, oh, I want to make a coconut oil product because I like coconut oil. And yeah, sure, of course, it's an oil. I'm going to put CBD in it, and just assume that's going to be all great, and maybe it's not.
Yeah.
So like that's I could totally see somebody doing that. I probably could see myself doing that without like thinking about it. I probably also wouldn't think that such research might be out there too. But always look, because you'd be surprised what you find. And sometimes, like we say all the time, where I like to remind people, things are counterintuitive sometimes, and you might think that there's no problem, but there's actually a big problem. So yeah, be careful,
Right.
this kind of, yeah, more broadly about CBD products. That's another one we talk about, how you have to get way more than like 5 or 10 milligrams for a lot of the effects that people are ascribing to CBD. So I kind of feel like it fits in that wheelhouse of a topic.
So, and these are, they're significant difference. I'm kind of surprised that there's that much difference on the one level between these different oils. I'm also sort of a little disappointed that they didn't include butter or other sort of animal fats.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I just looked up here. This is the International Journal of Pharmaceutics, so not even like I don't know, like it's not even related to like oils of plants or anything like that. So they're not off the
Right.
hook.
Yeah, no, they're talking about
Yeah,
delivery
no.
oils for CBD is their interest, right? So,
But they did say vegetables, and maybe they're vegan. Meh.
yeah, but exactly, but they're doing research. So if they're talking about how different fats basically act as carriers, it would be certainly interesting, especially since it's a really commonly used one.
But they're
Using
just looking at oils
butter.
only. These are all oils.
Right, right.
Butter's
Well, no,
an
vegetable
animal
oils,
oil,
but
basically. I mean, it's
yeah.
it's the same basic thing.
But
Just
I
whether
guess
you get the fat from a vegetable source, which is all these vegetable oils like olive oil, sesame oil, soybean oil, or whether you get the fat from an animal source like dairy, and distill that into butter. They're both sort of lipids that we use to dissolve cannabinoids. So it would have been interesting just to do the comparison, because that's something that, there's been a lot of debate about people that make canna butter or people that make coconut oil. And the big discussion there in that I've sort of witnessed was about sort of the health effects, and that coconut oil is healthier. So people aren't sort of as aware maybe that there could be significant differences in how well they act as carriers.
I just sent a link to the Zoom chat. I'll probably post it on the YouTube here in just a second, to another article that examines the effect of, they're looking at medium chain and long chain triglycerides incorporated in self-nano emulsifying drug delivery system on oral absorption of cannabis. And granted, this is in rats, but yeah, it's examining both THC and CBD. So we might want to follow up this article or even weave that in. I'm just trying to see if I can find, I was looking for a similar article that did this with just THC, but there's no comparable article that I can find, at least through Google Scholar, that is doing basically like these, several oils and seeing how the absorption of THC in the blood is impacted. So maybe that'll be something this research group does next. And or we could also cross compare some similar-ish articles, but I think that we still have some more meat to chew on with this one here a little bit.
Yeah, and so this is the blood serum, I assume. Nice, it's red colored, so it's blood. I like it when the people do that. It's thematic. I actually was going to ask Dr. Coco, being the culinary-minded person that you are, and giving the chemical dress down that you just did, do you think ghee would be better or worse as a carrier for CBD, or perhaps another cannabinoid?
Yeah, it's the sort of the refined part of the butter, right?
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not trying to play stump the chump, because I'm the chump here. I don't actually know.
Yeah, I think that potentially, from what now I may be a little bit off, but I believe that ghee is just sort of the more refined aspect of butter.
Feel like you're
Yeah,
right.
ghee is butter with the fat. I think the fat's taken out somehow, maybe. No,
Ghee is a type of clarified butter
yeah, it's
originating from the Indian
clarified. I don't know.
subcontinent. It is commonly used for cooking, traditional medicine, and religious purposes.
Yeah. So
Cool.
I think I'm not aware of why it would be different than other butters.
Oh,
Like Tao
okay.
was saying,
Not-
the clarified element, it is removing some sort of, it's basically like a concentrate, like a butter concentrate. They're
Yeah, maybe
Comes-
removing some other
So-
impurity, and it may give more sort of space for cannabinoids to dissolve, but I don't know that it
Yeah,
will
it's more
act
butter fat.
differently in its carrier sort of capacity as if
I
with
see.
cannabinoids.
It's just higher fat
May.
content.
yeah,
So
they
as you
skim a lot of the
clarify, you
impurities
get
from the surface and
Yeah.
pour the stuff off, and then the remaining stuff is more clear, and liquid fat is also discarded from the solid residue that has settled to the bottom. Spices can be added for flavor. This is just me reading off Google, but I figure some context here would be good from some stuff that's, you know, a little bit more informed on the subject here than
Yeah,
us
if
just
you ever,
guessing.
If you just
I
find
work-
high butter fat butter too, that works. Like Kerrygold, you can buy that right at the store, supermarket.
Yeah.
I worked at a restaurant that served lobster. They have this big bucket of butter always melted. And that white stuff that comes on the top, I think that's what they skim off to make it clarified. And
Exactly.
obviously the sediment at the bottom they leave, I'm assuming. But yeah,
I
I'm
think
not
you're right.
100%. Yeah.
I love that fancy restaurant I go to back in Ohio. They put a little candle underneath the butter, and it's like, you know, drawn butter. It's just melted. It's table side if you get a certain lobster dish. So very well worth it, but expensive. But that being said, back to the oils and butter conversation. We've got no butter in this one, but lots of different types of oils, and it's definitely interesting research. And I'm curious what else maybe we could take from this one.
You know, not a whole lot. I feel like, again, I didn't go through the entire research report. If anyone in chat did or anything like that they want to talk about, that'd be cool. But yeah, no, I think that I mean, I already knew going in like what the answer was. We already know it's olive oil is the main one. So yeah, I mean, I guess the only like other thing that comes to my mind is that I know several of these oils have a much higher smoke point than olive oil does. I don't know how relevant that is for anyone really, but and they do say olive oil, but you know, there's all kinds of olive oil. So you know,
Yeah.
maybe I'll take a look at that right here.
This other article, by happenstance, does choose to use sesame oil, which is one of the ones that was described in the article we're currently looking at. Miglylol, Miglylol, trademark.
Likely.
Yeah, whatever that is. But they're cocoa butter, trisoprin, type 2. They're just examining the difference between long chain triglyceride and medium chain triglyceride. So it does say that in the rat model, it demonstrated the effect of each type of lipid bioavailability of cannabinoids is not straightforwardly anticipated. The differences in the effect of LCT and MCT on absorption was not substantial for type 1 formulations, however, more prominent for type 2 formulations. This is unpredictable behavior in vivo, demonstrates the importance of investigating each vehicle preclinically following in vitro development. So I think that might be potentially what led, let me see when this was posted, April 2020. And our other article was more recent than that. I'm 99% sure it was
I think it might be this
2022,
year.
August.
Oh, last year.
So 2 years after the article that I was just referencing. And that article that was done in rats, sort of, I would imagine, if it isn't directly cited by the article that we're currently discussing, maybe was at least something the researchers were aware of. And maybe that's why they chose, I think type 2 is referring to CBD. So there was more of an effect with the CBD, and with THC, it didn't seem to matter across oils, at least in the rat study. So that is something that needs further investigation in human models, because we do find in research, oftentimes the rat models do not correspond with the human models. Not like at a high percent. It really depends on the area of research, but sometimes there is high correlation and it shows up with people, and sometimes there's not. It really just depends on the drug and the thing that you're examining. So
Yeah, we're not exactly like rats. We're similar, but we're not exactly the same as rats.
well, lab rats are interesting because they have like
The knockout gene, something.
yeah, so specifically they have really short telomeres, or like their DNA, because they're like genetically identical. They have issues with like cancers and things like that that may show up a little bit sooner or later based on the way that the genetics, like Tao is kind of referring to, like certain genes get knocked out maybe sooner or later than they would in humans, and it might not be a perfect model. So some of the
Right.
stuff, nothing's perfect, but it at least gives us a basis of understanding and area to research. So
I know a few human rats, so we can.
oh, there's plenty.
Yeah.
You that aren't too dissimilar to the lab rats. Yeah.
So Matthew has pulled up the second article that I was referencing just a little bit earlier. This is 2020 when this was posted, but I found it a little bit interesting, and yeah, just kind of touched a little bit on what we were discussing earlier, Tao's point that THC being dissolved into different, fatty acids or oils, it shows that there's not a significant difference in the uptake in rats versus the CBD showed apparently larger uptake difference with certain oils, and specific oils did a better job. So that's sort of like the quick takeaway I've gotten from this. Matthew's scrolling through right now, and maybe we'll be able to find some specifics and back that more with some of the information and stuff in the article. But yeah,
I'll say anecdotally, I made infused butter, and I've made infused coconut oil, and the results seem very similar. And I've switched to coconut oil because of, hearing that the MCT oil and the coconut oil is better. And I just took it at face value. I didn't go studying it, but it seemed to be about even. But I will say, in my experience, it seems easier to extract the coconut oil off the material than the butter. But that could be, in my head as well. I didn't really, I don't know how that could be subjective, I guess.
I think that what you might be noticing is, I think that coconut oil or MCT, especially like that higher quality of coconut oil.
I just use regular coconut oil, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Either way, but I think that if you Google like the temperature that it is liquid versus the temperature butter is liquid, I think butter is a liquid at a much higher temperature than coconut oil. And so to be in a room that's hot enough to keep butter fully liquefied is much less common than if you're like, I'm here in Southern California, when it's warm, my coconut oil is liquid.
It's water, yeah.
It is a straight up liquid. So if I'm straining the material out, that's one of the reasons Lady Greenstock would infuse coconut oil. It tastes fine in the brownie mix that we used, and it was really fucking bomb. It's super subtle, and like the butter is just so much harder to work with. So we just went with it, and they were both effective.
I bought silicone gloves just for this, so I could squeeze the plant material with my hands and get the butter out. But it was like, and it's still, you can only do it like a little bit because it starts heating up like through the silicone. So but you can like squeeze it. Yeah. And
I'll tell you a mini hack. I got, they call jelly strainer bags. So after my stuff is done, I put all the material in a jelly strainer bag, pour it through. Then I put it in a potato ricer that I got that's pretty oversized, or the biggest one I could find. I actually broke it because I squeezed it so hard it cracked apart, but put it in a potato ricer and I squeezed the Jesus out of it. And yeah, I think that's the best way I get most of my oil back. So that's what I've been doing. I also saw like a grape press or a tomato press with like literally like kind of like a car jack in there, or a turning. You could spin the thing down and it'll crush it out.
Cheesecloth, or what are you filtering it through?
It's called a jelly strainer bag.
Okay.
So it's like, it's kind
they're
of
designed
like,
to take the stuff out to make jellies. They'll take the fiber
you could also
or whatever.
use your hash making bag. What do they call those? The bubble bags. Use an old bubble bag. It's perfect.
Nut milk bags are similar. Like if you're making almond milk and things like that.
You can just use your rosin press to squeeze the butter out.
Another tip I saw today on Instagram, somebody was using like the candy form bag. So basically it's like a plastic bag that you squeeze. Sometimes you'll see like icing and people using it for like cake decoration. So essentially it's just like a plastic bag that you cut a little hole on the bottom and you squeeze it, and it pipes out a certain amount of whatever. It could be, friggin' frosting. It could be whatever. But in this case, they were using it for edibles to like pour into molds. So they poured like their hot jelly solution, and then they have that they pour into like little circular, things with their logo on them or whatever. And they were just kind of dosing it out into each one using that. And they said that was the most effective solution that they found for.
Clever.
Yeah. So that's just
one thing.
One
in this
tip.
paper, this discussion section, they point out that the oral route is maybe convenient for people, but it possesses some challenges, and they say that would be that of low and erratic absorption of things like THC and CBD. So that's interesting. That might also account for some of the maybe wonkiness, or maybe why something might seem samey, even if like these research reports are coming out and there's a more obvious difference between them. Well, there could be other reasons for that too. They said that THC and CBD are both, and I'm glad that Tao asked that question, because now we're investigating such a question. They're both poorly soluble in an aqueous environment of the GI tract. So that's a prerequisite condition for optimal drug absorption. So if they are soluble, then it's great. If they're not soluble, not so great. So this kind of research is more helpful than one might think.
Well, and it kind of makes sense, because we know how, if you just ate raw cannabis, most people don't get any sort of effect. So you have to do like sort of a bunch to it to, decarb it or cook it or some sort of process to make it activated and, enjoyable to the end user. So I think figuring out the most effective oils and the fact that it, might not be 100% that we're extracting. So like a lot of people, I know like Spartan Grown has mentioned in the past, like using rosin pucks to make RSO with, for example. So it's like you do one extraction, and although you think like, oh, I pressed 20% out of this flower and I got 2 grams out of my 10 grams of flour, and I'm happy, and now I'm going to dab that 2 grams of flour rosin. But you can take those chips, some people will eat them because they're already activated from the heat, but like Spartan keeps a bunch in a bag, throws them in there with some alcohol, and I think he said that was some of the best RSO he ever made, and it yielded really well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's the biggest yield I get usually when I run that. It's not only the pucks, but it's the bags themselves, that the pucks are in. They yield so good.
Oh yeah, because like we're talking about with the gloves and everything, like cannabis, the resins, like it sticks to everything. So if you can then soak it in a solvent and then like boil that solvent off and then be left with just the oil, you're going to get a lot bigger return on your investment. I also have mentioned this in the past, but when I vaporize, I get like what we call duff, or already been vaped buds, like the brown stuff that's left over. You could smoke that still and like get high off it, or you could collect it into a little jar, and then I use it for RSO every so often, and it makes really, really good RSO because it's already decarbed and it actually yields decently. And I don't feel like I'm wasting any product that I could have otherwise maybe smoked or enjoyed. So yeah, but it looks like Matthew has highlighted a few different portions of the article. I'm curious if you have anything pertinent that maybe you want to update on us further here.
Pertinent is a strong word, but basically here in the conclusion, they say that there's a discrepancy between LCT and MCT. And they said that there's a lot of unpredictability with regards to their use in this way. The THC and CBD have a relatively substantial association to the chylomicrons, which are apparently some sort of a lipid product in the body. But I'm not privy to the details. And they say that there's a potential for lymphatic absorption. The addition of this route of absorption may not be dominant for cannabinoids in SNED's constellation, which is also a technical term I'm not familiar with, but I could probably find out. Anyways, there's a lot of math, which everyone loves to see on YouTube. So I don't know. Maybe we should go to the main attraction, unless we have anything else.
No, I think that I just sent the link over to the Zoom, so you have easy access to it if you haven't already pulled it up. I don't know if you want to walk us through it, or if you want somebody else to take the reins there, but you've been doing a great job. So you always have a pretty good eye for the science, and I like that you're able to highlight certain things and flip back and forth. So we do have the article up if you want to just refresh the people on the title of this one, and then we can jump right into it.
Yeah, with gusto. The title of this paper is Minor Non-Terpenoid Volatile Compounds Derive the Aroma Differences of Exotic Cannabis. And I want to reiterate that they've got some really cool diagrams, very photogenic here. We'll have a lot to talk about. I almost feel like the authors knew that if they did it right, look at this, then it would generate a lot of acclaim and a lot of people talking about it. So, not trying to say that you should be flashy, and science by PowerPoint is actually a big white whale of mine, but hey, guess what? This is kind of cool to look at. So the abstract says, Cannabis sativa produces a wide variety of volatile secondary metabolites that contribute to its unique aroma. The major volatile constituents include monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, and their oxygenated derivatives, derivates. In particular, the compounds beta-myrcene, D-limonene, beta-caryophyllene, and terpenylene are often found in greatest amounts, which had led to their use in chemotaxonomic classification schemes and legal cannabis sativa product labeling. I think they mean like chemotype 1 through 3, that kind of thing. While these compounds contribute to the characteristic aroma of cannabis sativa and may help differentiate varieties on a broad level, their importance in producing specific aromas is not well understood. Here, we show that across cannabis sativa, varieties with divergent aromas, terpene expression remains remarkably similar, indicating their benign contribution to these unique specific scents. Instead, we found that many minor non-terpenoid compounds correlate strongly with non-prototypical sweet or savory aromas produced by cannabis sativa. Coupling sensory studies to our chemical analysis, we derive correlations between groups of compounds, or in some cases, individual compounds that produce many of these diverse scents. In particular, we identified a new class of volatile sulfur compounds, VSCs, containing the 3-mercaptohexyl functional group, responsible for the distinct citrus aromas in certain varieties, and scatol as the key source of the chemical aroma in others. Our results provide not only a rich understanding of the chemistry of cannabis sativa, but also highlight how the importance of terpenes in the context of the aroma of cannabis sativa has been overemphasized. And with that, I'm going to reiterate that they knew their audience when they wrote this abstract, and also probably the intent of the entire paper.
They definitely strike me as part of the community for a couple of different reasons, but they're not strangers to cannabis.
I agree with that. And, with that, why don't I just peek back up here? Here's a list of the authors. Nobody I recognize off the top of my head. But yeah, so if you like this kind of stuff, maybe check out these other people's works. And that's what I like to do when I find a really cool.
What university is this associated with? Who is behind this research?
Well, so actually, this is not if it is a journal, it's a journal I'm not familiar with, but I think this is actually more like a white paper.
Let's no, this is a journal.
Yes, that's
by
right.
the American
Abstract.
Chemical Society.
Abstracts Tech. It's funded by Abstracts Tech, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, Department of Research at Abstracts Tech.
Yeah. So it's a white paper, actually, which might explain some of the sort of more colorful, notes, literary and otherwise. But it does have a DOI, but still.
Yeah, that's just their affiliation. I mean, this is published by in the Journal of the American Chemical Society, which may be a trade group as well. But yeah, there's some other things. I mean, this struck me as a little bit different. Like a lot of their data comes from 7 people. They don't say if it's them or not, but I suspect it. I mean, they would have to disclose that somewhere. And I didn't read the full article sort of end to end. I was wondering who the 7 people were that did most of the analysis, sort of the classification. I found the methods pretty interesting, and it really sort of suggests people that know their
Looks
way
like the
around
authors are from
cannabis.
California and Canada.
I just really like that they're putting out there in a white paper and saying, look, we've had these cannabis strains or cultivars
Yeah.
that smell very different from each other, but have the same terpenes. And it's not the terpenes that are driving that scent, it's some other compound. I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty revolutionary to a lot of people who are still stuck on terpenes.
Yeah, and they found some compounds that they think are responsible for some of those scents and sort of show how the standard terpenes that we're more accustomed to aren't varying between the samples, but our perception of the flavor and smell are. So that's coming from other things.
I saw a presentation from someone, and yeah, I don't know, it was a woman. I don't know what her status is, but she was saying that all cannabinoids are terpenes, but not all terpenes are cannabinoids. So what is the exact definition of a terpene and exact definition of a cannabinoid? Because they could be like overlapping, you know?
Yeah, there can be overlaps in a sort of chemical nomenclature, because on the other, like when somebody says terpene, do they mean this more colloquially, or do we include terpenoid or terpenoids and things like this? So there's there's like there's a question, a very good question about where the definitions are and where the line gets blurred. Usually it's like, in my experience, I'm mostly familiar with like when we're talking about chemical structure and we're arranging them by structure, but that's not always how people arrange chemicals.
I think that the woman who Tao was referring to terpenoids, and cannabinoids, but I could be incorrect about that. She may have said specifically terpenes, but when I've heard that similar quote, I've heard somebody say all cannabinoids are terpenoids, but not all terpenoids are cannabinoids.
There's showing them separately in the chart that we have on the screen there but cannabinoids, at least several of them are volatile organic compounds. So I'm not sure why they would sort of separate that from volatiles. These are all different volatile organic compounds that we're interested in.
I guess maybe some of them are more responsible for flavor, even in smaller amounts. Like I've notoriously kind of rallied around
volatile
methylanthranolate, even though it's like in extremely small percentages, like sub 1% almost always. It has a very strong impact on the flavor and the aroma.
Yeah.
It's that artificial grape candy kind of smell that a lot of cannabis has.
And what they're saying here is some of these VSCs on this chart, the volatile sulfur compounds that they were describing, are new sort of compounds that we're sensitive to and to the aroma of cannabis.
I'll say this, they're not like new, because I've been reading about them since 2013 on like cannabis forums that were describing the skunky smells as ethyl mercaptan and all the different mercaptans, certain ones that smell like burning rubber, certain ones that smell like skunk. I could pull up an article that I use as a reference guide that has it from like over a decade ago, but it's new to the current scientific research because we're only now being able to research it in the US.
Sure. I mean, I don't know that publishing on sort of chat boards and forums counts as sort of prior work in a lot of cases unless it gets rediscovered. But I agree, Jack. I think there's a lot of stuff that the community is sensitive to and aware of that's not sort of picked up in the peer-reviewed literature.
Well, one thing actually that I think a lot of people don't realize, and it's not my great forte, but I do know that scents, I've often read when talking about like early life and things, like one of the first senses that existed for organisms is scent or chemoreception, right? Before you had eyes, before you even had the ability to detect light versus dark.
No,
it was
probably not
chemoreception.
temperature, but yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah. So that's very poetic, and you can make sort of associations with that knowledge, but also scents and flavors therein are kind of fuzzy, right? And just because you have more, like it's not obvious and counterintuitive to think that, oh well, if I get more of a certain concentration of a compound, it's going to be more intensely that smell.
I
And
wonder
that
if
is
a
not what
bloodhound
happened.
has the same perception of that, Matthew. Right?
What?
Like humans are really bad at smell compared to a lot of other organisms. So it may be sort of more muddled just because we're not very good at it. Like if our vision was blurry.
Once
in the
trained, we're
first
very good
instance.
at it. It's a misconception
Well,
that humans have
I
bad
guess
smell.
I mean it in a specific fashion, I guess. And yeah, it's not my forte, but I guess like I agree with you. Imagine the world of a honeybee, for
Yeah.
example, or a mosquito.
But like, let's
Or-
imagine the world of a person like, I think his name is Peter Dame, the greatest sommelier, or I'm always mispronounce that fucking word. I'm sorry, but
Sommelier.
somebody told me it's some. I'm not even gonna try and say it properly, but whatever.
I
However,
believe
it's
the
said.
French is better, yeah.
But he can smell a wine and tell you the year it was grown, the country of origin, and the
Yeah.
type. He's specifically been
know.
trained over years and years and years. He trained his nose to smell. And granted, he has some genetic probably gifts that some people don't have, but he's also trained thousands of other sommeliers to do similar things to him. And humans actually do have not quite bloodhound level, but extremely powerful noses. Once we do smell, we use it for survival. If we smell rotten meat, if we smell
Not nearly
dead body.
But I'm not talking about
There's
that.
science on this. Like the bloodhounds can detect things at like 100 times or 100,000 times less concentration than a human can. Talking about
Right.
sort of the amount, like somebody can walk through a forest, like in a month later, the bloodhound can still smell that person's unique identifiers, where those scents are utterly lost to us. I mean,
Right,
I
but-
do agree that we can train them, and some of us are much better than others, but there's other creatures that are sort of like literally thousands of times better at perceiving.
I'll just say
smells.
don't underestimate human smell, because like we can smell
Sure.
stuff from miles away, and we can smell stuff that's in parts per billion of concentrations. So human smell is
Especially things you've
extremely
evolved
acute.
to be, yeah, especially things like poisons and toxins and stuff, or like things that are bitter, for example. But we've also
Well, we
evolved
imbibe
to-
on these alcohol, the thing that you can smell in there, and cannabis. Some of the things, they're literally toxins to us, but that's what make us high off of them. That's what make us drunk off of them. We're evolved to sort of avoid them, even like molds, like blue cheese, where people like the taste of blue cheese, even though we're supposed to avoid certain molds.
It's an acquired taste there, Jack.
Yeah, and I think that it's one of those things, people gravitate towards different things for different reasons, and sometimes they do end up having like probiotic benefits or other things like that.
sometimes it's maladaptive.
And terpenoids
Right.
have oftentimes anti-inflammatory and anti other types of effects like that. So there are medical therapeutic effects, but it could also be like harsh on our throat, so it's a
But to be
double-edged sword
honest,
sometimes.
the ability to detect something is kind of irrelevant to the point I was making, which is that even if we're able to detect it to some level, and there is a level, and that level is different for different organisms, which I think Dr. Coco was trying to make a point about. But what's really interesting, and I think it's still probably true, although we start to get into we started to get philosophical here and about consciousness and about sensing things, the black box problem. But I suspect it might be similar because the physiology is similar, that when you have an increased concentration of some of these aromas, they cease, the concentration matters to
Yeah.
how we interpret it. So it can feel like things that are totally not related. I guess that's the point I was trying to accentuate. So like a thing that smells like strawberry at a certain concentration, like strawberries or what you might think of as strawberries, right? Of course, I'm not sure if the color red that you see is this exact color red that I see, but I think I might want to make that caveat. But
Yep.
if you up the concentration, it can start to
Absolutely.
smell like something very different. Yeah.
You know what a
Yeah.
great example of this is musk. I
Yes,
mean,
very
it's like
much so.
1 or 2 drops per like liter of alcohol is like wonderful. Any more than that smells awful. Like, and you get like really
scatol.
concentrated. It's like intolerably bad. But yet it became like the original sort of cologne because like in really low concentrations, we really like it.
Ambergris is like that too, right? I
Yeah.
think.
super valuable, liquid gold in the
yeah.
ocean.
Yeah. So they mentioned in this paper scatol, which I bet you could figure out what it's related to if you think about it for 2
Scat
seconds and
shit.
just speak English. Yeah. And it's what makes pork taste really good when you're frying it, when you're cooking it. It's only a little bit. If you had too much, well, it might
Yeah.
smell worse.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of that scatol compound that we associate with, and it's attractive to many people.
Well,
And I
That
would
might
argue
explain the-
cannabis we kind of like a little bit more than that than we would in other things, right? Like we kind of like it when the cannabis is a little bit ripe and funky and
Funky, yeah.
Some phenos
Yeah.
actually smell like shit. Like
Yeah,
I know
that's
people that
the
pick
Yeah,
that, or like
exactly.
baby diapers and shit like that. Like it literally actually smells like shit sometimes, and it's because some of those chemicals are shared apparently across.
right. And if you opened a beverage that smelled like that, you wouldn't drink the beverage.
That's true.
Yeah. Or like I recently was gifted some Sichuan peppercorn oil from a friend, and like I always tell the story, like I love Sichuan pepper. I love the like numbing, like prickling sensation. It's not really the same thing as like a scent, but like it's one of those things where if you didn't know going into it, like you just ordered something at a restaurant and you start to feel like your tongue get prickled, you're gonna think that you're oh no, somebody's up there. You're gonna think that you're having like a toxic event, like you're being poisoned, right? Like it's a very funky interaction for those who've never experienced it before. And I think it's kind of like that, where the context is really important. But sometimes people get like weird and like they have like a bad I think we all have had this before, where you've eaten some bad sushi or something, and then you can't eat that food anymore, right? So
Right.
it's very powerful, like Jack says.
Yeah.
Or getting too drunk on tequila, puking your guts out, and
Yeah.
not wanting tequila ever again.
Or at least for
Exactly.
many years.
I will
I'll
say
tell you
Yes.
what.
I forgot to give Noah the Grow a chance when he jumped in, so I want to let him go ahead and introduce himself now because he got here a little bit late, but we're happy to have him. Cheers, Noah. How you doing?
Doing good. Just enjoying the conversation. Yeah, sorry I was a little bit late. I was helping some friends move. But yeah, I'm Noah the Grower and happy to be here.
So we're just checking out this article that's about aromatics of cannabis, kind of outside of terpenes. They did touch on terpenes, but they're talking about the other stuff that sort of leads to these sweet, savory, and prototypical, what they're calling earthy, skunky, and spicy, with lots of different chemicals that might be responsible.
Even RSO, I like the taste of that, where at first it was a little acrid, but I like it now.
Yeah, and we learn to, like you said, it can be an acquired taste. You learn to appreciate. I've told the story about the guy who home brewed beer on a ship, and then he's like, "Oh, it doesn't taste the same," but it actually kind of tasted gross to most people because of the temperature fluctuations. But there's no accounting for taste, right? Now, I'm curious what the panel thinks about these designations, these silos here: sweet to savory with prototypical in the middle. Like you guys know my shtick. I'm just life has just made me kind of a cynical in an unfortunate way. So people will tell me, "Oh yeah, that's XYZ," and I'm like, "Okay, like maybe it is."
Yeah.
So
Now, looking at this, I do think we'd probably recognize a difference between like GMO versus, what is that, Jackman or
Jack Herrer, OG Kush, garlic cookies.
no, grape pie times or crossed with do-si-do, the top one. I think
Oh, sorry.
there may be some, perceived differences between them, but I kind of feel like this effort of showing the data makes it look like it's a little bit more solid data than the data actually is. I mean, this ultimately comes, I believe, from their descriptions of their experience using these.
It does. You were
Yeah.
correct. It kind of dresses it up and makes it makes it feel very scientific, right? And very concrete.
Well,
Doesn't it?
and what
And then
they're
the way they
doing,
plot the data like this, like showing different heights of specific sort of peaks and valleys, as though this was,
Like it's a
a
chromogram.
chemical assay or something. I mean, this is
Yeah.
not what it actually is. So, but they also said, like, based on the descriptive words they used a multiplying effect. Like, so if it was very garlicky, then that would be like twice as high of a spike as if they just said it was garlicky.
And those words are directly underneath the humps. So you can see that at the very bottom, it's like skunky, garlicky on the right word, like GMO is.
Yeah,
It's really small
exactly.
text, but it is corresponding to the different flavors above.
And then how many people said it and what kind of modifiers they used
Yeah.
refer to the heights of those. I just find sometimes when we try to plot out data, when we're presenting data, like what the data actually is, I thought got lost a bit in this. And it seems like trying to harden your data a bit by showing it this way, making it appear to be sort of more significant than it really was.
I actually like that you said that. I have a similar opinion about that. It does look like a chromatograph or something, right? Or
Yeah.
like a light frequency analysis, when it's really person's opinion was that this was gas,
Yeah.
and that this person's opinion was it's like maybe fruit, whatever that means, right?
And the other person said it's very fruity. So now we got like a 3 high peak over on the fruity side, right? Like, yeah.
So this is subjective, and it's not like based on some sort of spectrograph.
Yeah.
Can't they put these things
and
in
it's
some
also
sort
confusing.
of a sensor?
It's also
You know,
confusing because savory
do
is right
terpenes.
next to fresh and sharp, and grape pie is popping for fresh, sharp, and fatty, where GMO, which is like right next to it, is popping for savory, alaceous,
What is ethereal?
mothballs, astringent.
This is where it really started to break down for me. And I'm like, I just think they're trying to dress up their data to make it look a little fancier. They're also, if you get into that part of their methodology where they're describing the sensory analysis, so I'll read a little bit of this. It says the users measured each sample and were asked to describe the aromatic qualities. Intensity descriptors were allowed and used as multipliers depending on the term used. These descriptors can be found in table S4. The users were then asked to rate how sweet or fruity each sample was on a scale of 1 to 100, where 0 represented aromas considered more prototypical or savory, and 100 represented the sweetest. No formal lexicon was used to prevent the panel from using terminology. No formal lexicon was used to prevent the panel from using terminology they found useful. So the panel was allowed to use terminology they found useful. The raw user input was then refined and classified based on the sensory panel's interpretation of the descriptors into either sweet exotic, prototypical, or savory exotic, as seen in table S3. The results of the sensory panel were then tabulated as summarized in tables S5 through S9. So it seems like a lot of that, like people were asked to describe how they experience it, and then the research team refined and classified those answers in order to quantify it and chart out those charts like that. At this point, I think as a qualitative researcher, I would say a lot of the best data was lost as soon as you started, moving away from the actual words that the actual panelists used and what they said. That's good qualitative data. Trying to get kind of, a number out of that, I don't think it was necessary in order to do good science either, but I know a lot of scientists or articles like this feel that they're better if they can sort of be more quantitative.
Oh,
Thing that
absolutely.
really jumped out at me
Absolutely.
was at the beginning. I'll be honest, when they started calling things exotics, I already start rolling my eyes. I'm like, what the
And
fuck
then they're
are you talking
saying
about
that exotic on this chart is all the way to the left. So I guess
Yeah, exotic
GMO
means
is
fruity,
not exotic,
essentially.
or I might not be
Apparently-
understanding this.
GMO is
correctly.
apparently not exotic. Well, exotic is just a BS term because, like, like Spartan was kind of just alluding to.
Literally a contextual term.
You just
You
lost
couldn't
so
have
much.
picked a worse term.
You lost so much credibility right up front by saying exotic, because where is the definition? Exotic typically means it's from like a foreign land. So like if gelato,
Or
I'm
that
from
people are
California,
gonna take their
gelato is
clothes
literally not exotic at all, but they call it exotic more often than any other strain, right? Because it looks fancy. It feels exotic. An exotic car is usually a foreign car, a luxury car that's imported from a different land, and it's expensive.
Yeah, it definitely means something unique, like special, different, unique, kind of. Yeah,
Cannabis is just
I didn't
marketing.
understand
That's
it
all
as
it
the organizing premise there.
It's hype.
Because sweet to sorry, I'm looking at the screen and I can't see the other edge, but of that continuum bar at the top.
At the top.
Where's the section for the
Prototypical.
Zaza? Come
Oh,
on now.
sweet, prototypical, and safe.
Where's the Zaza? Where's the
Yeah,
crime?
Zaza needs to be added instead of exotic. Just call Zaza is exotic actually. Za is
Yeah.
exotic. Zaza.
Well,
It was called the Za, like pizza. They call it Za. It's shortened. Exotic. Za. Zaza. There you go. Anybody out there who didn't already know that?
man, etymology, man, that's tough.
It's more like
I
Ebonics.
do appreciate some other things. I appreciate that they gave priority to their strains based on the ones that were currently popular based on Leafly and weed maps.
Unfortunately, those are like the cannabis repositories at this point. What other public reference point does a researcher have to go to for seeing something that is popular in the scene and is in demand and is present? Unfortunately, like I hate to say it, maybe somebody else needs to come up with something better, because like those are all we have. It's that and then
We
seed
can
it's
use a
why-
strain review form at cocoforcannabis.com, but there's only a handful of strain reviews at this point. But yeah, no, I gotcha. But it's better than just, whatever they got from the government seizure. So
Yeah.
Well, and somebody
Sure.
just sent me one. I need to find it in my DMs. It was actually like pretty well done. Like what Phylos wanted to be, like showing like all the list of the strains, like where they actually came from, like a bunch of stuff like that. So I'll try and find that.
And today will be here. They have a savory exotic and a sweet exotic. So there's two different exotics. Nice.
Well, did they ask? See, I was going through that part quickly. At one point, I thought they said that they asked the users like how exotic they thought this strain was. This may
Oh
just
my
be
God.
sort of like their own idea of what exotic is.
On a
or
scale of
something.
1 to 100,
And
how many
that's what they were
exotics?
saying. Like these ones that the users found to be more exotic weren't different in terms of their standard cannabinoid profile. They were different in these other things.
I feel like it, if exotic is on one end, then it has to be domestic, right? Domestic is the opposite of exotic. That's
Domestic
got
would
this
absolutely
one tastes
be
really
better at that.
domestic. I don't know if that's going to catch on.
Local.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to
Yeah,
100,
local.
where 1 is an American and 100 is a Martian. That's how. That's the
Yeah,
scale
there
of
we go.
exotic.
Now, how high are you? A scale of 1 to 100. 1 is not high at all. 100 is you don't remember. It's like, yeah. No, I don't know. I think that if you're doing qualitative research like this, and obviously it's good. Obviously we need, and I think the 7 people that sat around and use this cannabis are probably good cannabis users. I do think we should learn a little bit more about their background if there's only 7 people that are doing sort of that sensory analysis. And then, how should we present that data? And how can we organize and sort of analyze that data? It's at that point that this started breaking down. I'm like, nah, I didn't like that. But I do think that they started off on the right kind of path in terms of how they chose the cannabis, how they wanted to try to tease it apart. But that exotic cannabis aroma spectrum chart was the thing that I probably had the biggest problem with.
I found it ironic. The group doing it, Abstracts Tech, is like a terpene selling company, and they're like, cannabis is more than just terpenes. Which is, I was like, really, y'all? Like,
well, they're about to come
terpene-
out now with whatever.
They're about
other
to
thing
pivot,
that's in there
obviously.
that
They're
Start
about to
selling the
pivot.
other.
Yeah.
And
I got
everybody's
it.
got terpenes, but they're the only ones that have that.
Shh, don't give away the secrets.
the business.
The
That-
volatile
I hate to say it,
sulfur
we
compounds.
have to, whenever we look into the funding source, it is important to acknowledge it, because
Yes.
stuff like this, because if they start selling scat
100%.
or whatever the hell, skyol or whatever, the scatol in
Scatol,
their
yeah.
concentrations, and saying, oh, our kush is more cushy because we got the scatol, nobody else has got it. But like you could buy like methylanthranolate by the liter or gallon for bird repellent. You can get it in grapes, you can get it in lang langs. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that naturally occurs. And although it's most commonly known in the art industry as like artificial grape flavoring, because like most of us are exposed to it as like Kool-Aid or like a grape sucker lollipop or like even like
it's
the
not
cough
in
syrup.
most grapes though, right? It's like only in Concord grapes or
It's only in
something.
Concord grapes for the most part. Table grapes
Yeah.
do not have it. So we're only like, as kids, we think of like grape flavor as like stuff that actually doesn't correspond with like the fruit that most of us eat as a table grape, but it is
but
in
grape
wine
flavored
grapes and
candy
jelly
doesn't
grapes.
taste like an actual grape.
Well, some jellies taste that
Right.
way. So I think like people that are, if you get like Smucker's jelly, it'll have like a
Sure.
little bit of that
It tastes like
methylanthranolate.
grape jelly. It tastes like methylanthranolate. I agree with you, Jack, but it doesn't taste like eating a grape tastes.
Exactly.
Eating
Exactly.
a grape
Right.
is like a totally different experience
Right.
as far as I'm concerned. And
No, I
things
totally
like
agree.
that, man. I think my whole life I just thought I was bad with flavor.
Because
Yeah,
the
it's
artificial
actually-
flavors
are
don't
very strong
correspond.
grapes that I'm
Watermelon
eating or something.
candy does not taste anything like a fucking watermelon. It's like this
No.
pink flavored thing that we all know what it tastes like, but it's nothing like an actual watermelon. Watermelon is like, fairly bland and it does have some flavor. I
No,
love watermelon.
I'm one of
but
the few
I
people
wanna
I know
pick a
that doesn't
blue
like
raspberry,
watermelon.
okay?
And I'll tell you, I don't like watermelon and I really don't like watermelon candy. So there is some common thread there.
They
that's
definitely hit
bothering
some
me on both
notes
sides.
for sure. There's
I love
also
that.
shared notes.
I love that in this graphic right here. This is in a white paper. And I love seeing pie ho in white papers. It always puts a smile in my soul when I see that. One
Yeah.
of those strains.
And
Some
then
of
you see
these
shit like
names-
Starburst, like waiting to get sued. And
Yeah.
all these other ones. I just got one. It was
Skittles.
blueberry Skittles, and it was spelled Skittles, like Skittles is spelled, not with a Z, not the
Oh,
Z.
no.
They spelled it Skittles, and I'm like, I'm keeping this jar as like a reference for old like historic.
This one's
sake.
literally called Lucky Charms.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Like just waiting to get their self sued.
Fruity
Unfortunately,
Pebbles.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say that this is also like, right, I've talked about it before, but I'll say it again. Like that's why like I find sommelier type stuff kind of I don't know, like it's so lossy and there's no guarantee it's gonna be a good representative for you anyways. It's maybe nice sometimes as a guide a little bit. I think there are maybe some hard and fast rules with like wine tasting and other things. I do this with tea. I record my experiences with tea that I've drank. I have a tea journal. I am that kind of person. But like, and it's the same kind of idea. But like, I guess we've talked about it, Dr. Cook, you've talked about it. Like, it's your experience and all this other stuff that will impact you. And there's so many studies out there to show how many vulnerabilities there are to personal bias that this exact kind of
I
articulation.
do believe you can get trained
has.
at this stuff and be better at it at 100%.
Sure.
But there's also going to be this point where nobody else is able to kind of follow you along with that because you're categorizing sort of subtle nuances that they can't perceive or identify the same way you can. I definitely think that
Or are
that's
they
also
liable
the
to
case with a
experience
lot of
it even in the
sommeliers.
same way?
What's
Yeah,
that?
no, but you're totally right.
Yeah, so I've always been torn on how useful that is to sort of me. Like having a sommelier pick my wine, is that really going to help me enjoy my meal? Maybe if I knew more about wine, it would.
or if they knew
But-
more about you and your palate and what you like.
Am I going to not enjoy it? That's the question. That's the real mark. Am I going to not enjoy my meal because I didn't pick right? Well,
Yeah, I don't know if I would pick up on enough. It's those differences. And I used to be a bartender and a server sort of in an earlier life. And I've done these wine tasting classes where we had to like, the guy came in and tried to like tell us like, it was hard. Like I don't think that I'm good at it maybe.
Here's the thing, Doc. Also, it's
Yeah.
marketing bullshit. Some of these guys were coming in selling just like shitty ass weed, saying, "Oh, it smells like blueberry, dude. Smell it. Doesn't it smell like blueberry?" And like, really, it smells like earth.
some of it's bullshit, pure and simple. But some people are actually like agreeing and can like you put them in two different rooms and they'll come back and say the same thing. And like I'd be like, it tastes
Yeah.
like wine.
It makes me think of like stand-up comedy classes, right? you can't really teach funny. You can kind of teach people like how the whole thing, you like set up punchline and things like that. You can
Right.
teach them how to like hold the mic closer to their face, how
Right.
to, do certain things to, do callback, whatever. There's certain technical aspects of it
Yeah.
that you can teach. But like in this
Certainly.
case, like there's actual genetic
Well,
things.
there's
Like
repetition
I went
and
to a
just getting
candy.
used to it. Like I don't drink a lot of wine or like ever. So like it's all just tasting basically the same to me. Like if I drank it all the time, every day, you become more sensitive to the finer nuances between it. The
Just like
same
with
thing
cannabis.
You need
cannabis.
glass.
Like, I'm
Non-users
much more
say it all smells
sensitive to
skunky.
find sensitivities between
Mhm.
cannabis. And some of my friends come over and they don't give a crap because it's all like they're just gonna get blazed off of anything I give them. And so I think it's more along those lines on a certain
There are
level.
super tasters, though. I would agree. I would agree that there are super tasters. I think to Jack's point, like
Well,
there
and
is
even just genetically, like you have it or you don't. Like I went to a candy, like it might have been
Right.
Hershey, PA, and they had us put like a little piece of litmus paper in your mouth, and it was like you can
Oh,
either
I
taste
remember
this
this
or you
test.
cannot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some people were like, raise your hand, I can taste it. And some people were like, I can't. So that's
Yep.
one of those things. Like you either have it or you don't. So you're either going to smell it or you don't, or you're going to experience it a certain way, or you might not even have the capacity to. Like when you eat a bunch of asparagus, when you use the bathroom, you urinate.
Mhm.
Some people can smell that, other people can't. So like that's a thing that separates people, and like it's a very distinct smell if you know what it smells like, but some people
Well,
will
and
never
you can
experience
become
it.
nose blind to certain things, right?
Definitely
And
can
very
become nose blind.
frequently your own odor, for example.
And
Yeah.
the cannabis that you're using, I mean, I actually think I need to have 4 or 5 different strains around. Like I have 4 right now, and I kind of wish I had 5 or even 6, because I get like switching strains really helps keep the flavor fresh in a way. Like you get kind of accustomed to them and they don't taste as good anymore. And then you go away, I won't smoke one of the 4 that I'm having for a few days, and I come back to it, I'm like, oh, that's really good. But if I smoke it for a few days, it kind of loses that, you become blind to it on a certain level.
I call that like strain tolerance. And then on top of that, most people don't eat the exact same meal every day. So like we like to have a little bit of variety. Like one day you might have, a certain thing, and then the next day you change it up. Or some people eat the same breakfast every day, and then they'll have a different lunch or something, or a different dinner. So there's a certain amount of routine that we are okay
Right.
with and we are accepting to. And then there's that little bit of us that wants to try new things and get out there and be adventurous. And I agree. I love having at least 5 or 6 or however many I can have on rotation, because then whenever I am tired of one or getting a little bit tolerant to it, I switch it up to something different. And then you get more out of every single bowl, because your tolerance is less to it.
4
You
is
taste it
enough
more.
for like day to day, like switching it up. But then I want to have that 5th one to just like bring in something different every once in a while. You know what I mean? Like that kind of keeping it fresh is more important to me than the specific strains that I'm smoking. I actually think in a lot of cases, just that it's rotating a little bit.
Good stuff. Matthew, do you want to continue going through this article at all, or do we have any more thoughts, questions, comments on this study?
I have not been looking at the chat at all, so that we have to be somebody
I'm not
else's
even on
goal.
that tab anymore.
I know, right? We're probably starting all kinds of fights. Like, why didn't you prep for that first paper? But
We're doing great.
Besides,
Just keep on rolling.
Yeah, no, I'm just joking. Self-deprecation. I have a lot of. Speaking of comedy, I have a lot of comedic greats that I appreciate, and one of them is those people who love to self-deprecate. Not too much, but just enough to be relatable. Just kidding.
Keeps it humble for
Figure
sure.
5 schematic highlighting key volatile compounds that produce specific aromas in cannabis. So, what do we think about this? I mean, here it's a little feels a little bit more interesting. I mean, because they're trying to bind these profiles to certain compounds, and I mean, I guess there's sort of a consensus that a lot of people have, like the chemical naphthol. I think we talked about naphthalene or something similar, some sort of compound being produced by cannabis or certain strains or cultivars or whatever. We have scatol here in the bottom right. I think this is supposed to be like a chemical, gassy sort of scent smell, right? But I don't know. It's all
Indole is
Greek
interesting because it's saying
Yeah.
chemical but a lot of like indole butyric acids and stuff like that, which are esters, smell really sweet or like pineapple-y or apple-y. And so indole by itself might be bitter or chemically, but then when it's mixed with these other, like, you know, however long the chain of chemical is, ester, aldehyde, whatever it is, they can end up smelling completely differently. So it is interesting. And I do think that some of this will be successful. They're going to say like, oh, creamy sweet. And then they're going to list a few chemicals that will be linked together. Just like with terpenes, we know like alpha pinene is related to beta pinene, which is related to terpinolene. And oftentimes they kind of roll together. And like, if you have alpha pinene in a strain, you're pretty likely going to have beta pinene in there. Same with like terpinolene, you're going to have a little bit of alpha pinene oftentimes in some amounts. Like they're, I think, genetically related at this point, and they show up together. So some of that stuff is understood and documented. But now we're starting to find more than just the terpenes. I'm glad that they're starting to put it out there. I've been talking about it for at least 3 years, looking back at my Instagram, and then that paper I found on, I think it was a THC farmer thing. I pulled up the thing, but it was linked with a doctoral research thing through University of Leiden, wherever that is, by, I can't even pronounce this guy's last name, but I'll share that on the screen a little bit later. But yeah, it was a THC farmer article by C4, and he quoted a few things at the bottom where he found his research, but that was in 2014. And so some of the stuff has at least been examined for near a decade, and it's great to see that it's becoming part of the cannabis literature, because now they're legally allowed to study it. And like many who've gone down this pathway of like aromatics and cannabis, once you get into the legal element, most people are like, okay, how much THC is there at first? And then you realize, oh, the highest THC isn't the most important. And you're like, what else is there? What makes it smell? And then you find terpenes on Leafly and all these other websites. And then now eventually we're going to start to see articles about esters and papers like this that are about different things like that.
Well, I'd like to see something that would have like, here's a callback to the first paper, where we're talking about infusing into oils. It'd be nice if when they've tested those oils, they tested not just for cannabinoid, but they start testing for these other compounds. Is there a way to capture some of these other compounds in the infusions, these oil infusions, or is there limits?
Which ones aren't very well?
Yeah. Like say, for example, is there an upper limit? There's got to be an upper limit to each oil. Like say, for example, coconut oil, it can absorb X amount of THC.
Right.
But if it can also absorb, like once it gets to its upper limit of the absorption on THC, it can also absorb some of these other compounds as well, above and beyond that. You know, we focus so much on just THC. It makes me wonder about some of these other side compounds, if we could get a good mix.
Shout out to like using flour here. I do think you're going to lose some of the, I mean, you're going to lose some volatile organic compounds whenever you do, you know,
any processing,
concentration and extraction, especially when you're kind of focusing on some, you may not be focusing on some of these others. So yeah, I think agree, Spartan. That's an interesting question.
I agree with that as well. I also feel like this, I think it was odd wording here, looking at the diagram, this fusel sweet, because I'm familiar with that in the homebrew scene or with alcohol in general. You know, fusel is German for like bad, I think, or like bad, or at least for like alcohol, bad alcohol. So like, you know, like some of the yeast, like I was saying in that story with the guy on the boat, you know, when the temperature fluctuates a lot, they don't like that because the yeast will produce like these off alcohols that we're very sensitive to, like Jack was saying earlier, and we really pick it out, and it's acrid, and it's not, we don't like it.
Yeah.
It makes it feel foxy, as they call it sometimes, or hot. So I'm not sure what that means here in this context. So like,
it has a very nasty smell, and most of its components and compounds, derivatives, and are characterized by their peculiar odors, which imitate to a nicety the odors of various plants, fruits, etc., as those for insects.
I missed the first part of this sentence.
Just describing fusel oils and things like that. But fusel, I think in this case, I was just reading the first definition on Google, odoriferous principles of fusel oils. But I think they're probably just referring to gassy smells like gasoline, fusel. I think they might have
I just wonder why they put
oversimplified
sweet there.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, is it just fusel? Fusel sweet? Is that to differentiate?
Sweet
it from
gas
the
is different
fusel
than
that's
sweet
not
sweet. Like sweet
I
gas.
guess so.
like I've got a lot of OGs that are sweet and gassy, but then there's a lot of stuff that's just like fruity, like strawberry cough. There's a little bit of gassiness to it, but it's mostly strawberry and like sweet. But then if you get like a OG Kush crossed with like a gelato, you get sweet gas.
So
So fusel is a word. I've never heard fusel.
Yeah, fusel is a German
Yeah.
word.
So
Okay.
it just looks like they're starting. I imagine like there's 5 different compounds in the fusel sweet color category. I imagine they all have somewhat different aromas, right? So we're trying to find convenient ways that make sense for us to classify them, and that's always kind of messy business.
It's my favorite topic. It's taxonomy. All the taxonomists are dying, though, unfortunately. And now everyone's a molecular biologist. But unfortunately, I mean, there's trade-offs for that too. But I agree with you. It's like, and I think we're also like, we're still in the cannabis space. There's a big, I think it's been a big movement away from this, but it still is prominent. I think people are grasping and using other groups, disciplines, like what we're talking about with alcohol and relating to other products, where there's aromatics like culinary arts. And we're kind of we're kind of cobbling that together as well, using that as like a base because people are familiar with that, so they use it like a loan word, so I think that's not like unreasonable conceptually. It's just that, yeah, I mean, this doesn't really tell. I mean, I don't know. We have your favorite though, Jack, methyl anthranilate, right at the top of the fruity floral. I think it's funny in some ways, also like just from a botanical standpoint, that like fruity and floral are that we. I do agree that there is a difference oftentimes, but the fact that we bifurcate them is kind of interesting since they're the one becomes the other. You know what I mean? But of course, different kinds of fruits, different kinds of flowers, different ends. Anywho, that was a bit of a tangent. Let's see if I can find something more interesting.
Another thing on that though, on that graphic we're just on, it seemed like the molecules, if you look at the molecules, like the physical way that they're physically put together, they're very similar in the same flavors. And as
Their
you change
structures.
The
flavors-
fusel?
yeah, and as you
Yeah.
change flavors, they change. So that's kind of
Oh yeah. Yeah, because they bind to your receptors and like like I was saying earlier, I again, I'm not an expert on the topic, but yeah, like there will be some really significant changes simply from the concentration threshold being different.
Anybody
Whether
who's
that's the same-
experimented with like club drugs, I'll say, knows how different
okay,
just a single alteration of a chemical or different variations
Sure.
of the psychedelics can also vouch to. But it is interesting. They are similar oftentimes. Like MDMA is more similar to like MA, methamphetamine, than it is to like alcohol, for example, right? Because alcohol is a depressant. Both of the other ones that I named
Oh,
are
nobody
stimulants.
wants to hear that, Jack. Nobody wants you to make them feel bad like that. You chose violence on this day.
I was just using classic categorizations of drugs that people are familiar with.
Yeah,
But-
people don't like to hear that. I have found in my life, but yeah, that's the chemistry. So, but yeah,
when there's
I mean,
MDA, which is also like another drug that's similar to both of those. So
true. And there's also those various research chemicals that people experiment with and can get in various places.
that was a good observation, though, Spartan. I'm glad that you pointed that out. And as Matthew kind of alluded to, like the biochemistry or whatever, the chemistry of it all is sort of important. And I'm glad that they're at least visually representing that for us, for the people that are educated about that. And they can sort of make categorizations and see if they stick or how well they work or don't work.
So yeah, here we have this now infamous exotic score decreasing and decreasing also this way as well. Yeah,
this
I
is
mean,
where we get
yeah.
into fantasy world is what
This is just user
Yeah.
experience. I kind of think this is like, how much did you
I
like
guess
it?
so.
How familiar were you with it versus the stuff that you're used to?
This
It's
is,
like
It's
it's such an
super-
arbitrary.
this is
reference
coolness factor. How cool was the bud that you just smoked?
How cool did you feel while smoking
the
it?
Fire score. This is the score of
Zaza
Za.
score.
Yeah. Although I do think it's interesting that they have it here, kind of relating to the monoterpenes and monoterpenoids, sesquiterpenes and sesquiterpenoids, and flavorants, which is also kind of, I feel, misleading because, like, we already said it, right? But aroma and flavor are related, of course.
Well, and it's just so complicated. When I look at that thing, I'm like, okay, I see a colorful square with a bunch of dots all over it. And I'm like, what does any of it even mean to the end user at the end of the day?
It looked like he was trying to say that train wreck was exotic.
They're trying to say the train wreck. I mean, what I'm reading is train wreck like dominates everything, but I don't know.
That's its terpene profile does, or aromatic profile. I should be more. I think
Yeah,
tonight
train
is that
wreck
we
is
got
what they're
to
showing
retire
us, both
terpene
those
profile.
skills.
We have to start saying aromatic profile now and not terpene profile. It's not all about the terps.
The volatile profile.
There you go. Say VOCs.
Yeah, I don't know why train wreck looks like a cross. None of the rest of them look like a cross, but I'm like colorblind, so I look at things like that, and I don't know that I see the same thing that everybody else does.
Wait, you're colorblind?
Yeah.
It's more common than you would think, Tal. A lot of people are.
Well, I know a
My
couple
father is
people with-
colorblind.
Many blue-eyed
So-
people are.
So,
Yeah,
like,
I read green
when I
colorblind.
say-
I mean, I still see colors. I always wonder.
Yeah, he's
why
not.
I
Yeah,
say
he's
that.
not.
Like people
Differentiating.
wonder like what my world looks like. Is everything's in black and white? Like, no. But if you put like a red object in front of a green background, particularly,
Oh, you
if the
read
red
green.
object isn't very big, I just will not see it at all. Like it doesn't.
My father is
stand
also
out
red-green
against the red
colorblind.
or against the green background.
They make like glasses now that can correct colorblindness
They
for
don't
certain
correct
types
it.
of people.
I've used those, Jack. All they do is turn everything like a really, really dark shade of purple. And then you can see contrast between things that you used to not be able to see contrast between, but it doesn't like allow you to
Genuinely,
see.
right.
It's like looking through the world under blurple light is what using those glasses are like. Okay. Like everything's purple, but now when they show me those little like round dots of colors, whatever, I see a 6 when I'm supposed to see a 6, where before like I didn't see anything, but it doesn't like actually.
It fascinates me. So, so maybe you are even more intuitive when you see plant leaves at discoloration. That
It's interesting. There's some things that are problematic. It's a good thing our leaves don't turn red. Like
Yeah.
leaves turning red, like little red dots appearing on the leaves. Like that would be a really hard thing for me to diagnose accurately. I will say I don't often see the hairs turn red or orange. So I'll see the white hairs so much more prominently than the orange hairs, that like my wife will come in and be like, oh, they've really gotten more orange since last time I whatever. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Like little things like that, I don't notice as much, but a lot of the plant problems are not kind of color sensitive in the same way.
They could
Well-
be maybe accentuated because of that. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. That you might notice it quicker.
Yeah, you might notice some things quicker. I don't know. I ever really noticed some things quicker, but yeah, some things like not the chart that's on the screen now, but the one that was there before where we're looking at the train rock cross, all those, that looks very much like a colorblind test. And I know that I see different patterns than everybody else sees when they look at those tests, because
In a bid to
the
be,
contrasts look different to me.
in a bid to be aware of my own personal biases, I've always wondered if that's why I liked like neon colors. Could be just a factor of growing up in the early 2000s, but maybe some of the way that I like perceive certain colors, maybe that's a little bit relevant. And I think I already said it before, but people like my father were able to pick out camouflage better because it didn't work the same, or at least certain kinds anyways. Nowadays that might not be as true as it was in the 70s or 80s, but yeah. Here,
That's interesting. I do think that maybe I can see some things that jump out, like some sort of patterns jump out. But I think that that's a different, because I'm not as sensitive to
think so
colors.
too.
It just like sort of blind people become better hearers and smellers and stuff like that, right? Because they tune up those. So I become more sensitive to like tone and pattern and things like that I can recognize. So like seeing a snake on a forested floor or something.
Well, and at a certain point, like everyone, they can make those colorblind tests to the point where like the reds are similar enough to the other reds or pinks or whatever hues that like
That you don't
only
see.
the 0.01% of the world is going to be able to see the number because the reds are so similar. Like even as a non quote unquote colorblind person, you will get to a point where like you cannot see it. The camouflage works in to use that example, I guess, but there's definitely a point that everybody gets to. But in Doc's case, like his wife being able to see the orange hairs versus him, it's probably like looking at like a green golf ball, you know, at the top of the bud. It's just like all one thing essentially, which is kind of fascinating to, you know, understand that experience a little bit deeper.
Oh my
But,
God, if I ever played golf with a red golf ball, I would never be able to find the golf ball.
That's a
I
great
would hit it,
point.
it would
Yeah,
go
the
off in
hues are the
grass, I would
same.
never
Good
see
luck.
the thing again. It would be gone. Yeah.
you needed somebody to
Um,
guide you. That should be like a challenge game. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. And then have somebody lie about their colorblindness, and then they get to the
Dominate.
end.
They get the Olympic record.
Yeah. They
They identify as colorblind. Anyway,
This,
sorry.
I know
moving on.
they do these other tests, like when they go show those little cards, they're like, you're supposed to see a 9 or whatever, but I'll see a different number. And they're like, if you
Oh,
see
yeah.
a 12, that means that you have this specific kind of color blindness, which sucks because on most of them, I don't see anything. And I get so excited. I'm like, oh, I see a 12. Like, oh no, you're not supposed to see it. You're supposed to see a 6. But since you see a 12, I'm like,
It's like that's confirmatory. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
But it's
exactly.
cool that they can do that kind of stuff to
Yeah.
figure that stuff out. Do we want to wrap this one up? Do we have anything else, Matthew, that you wanted to share with this article?
Well, a little bit. I just wanted to point out that on this figure, it seems like the higher exotic score, at least for some of these,
The more
has
terpy it was.
D-limonene and beta-myrcene being pretty far along the exotic score, which is surprising to me considering their ubiquity.
But
Whatever.
I think maybe that's what people associate with like good cannabis. So although they're ubiquitous, when they're in high amounts, that's what people kind of associate. Like, oh, that's good bud. It smells like a little bit
Mhm.
limey and a little bit,
which
you
they
know,
might consider to be not very common, and therefore maybe the exotic
or just like the
terminology is
potency.
being-
Like if there's a strong amount of those, there's usually a good amount of all the other stuff.
Or it could
Oh,
just be
yeah.
the fact that it's in a lot of all the strains. So of course, when they say, yep, that's exotic, it's going to be a high chance it's going to be in there just because in just about everything
That's true.
to begin with.
Yeah, we're not
Anything
seeing all
else
the other
worth-
stuff that's not.
That's
and it defeats
pretty
the
much it,
definition
I
of
think.
exotic that I like to use.
Yeah, it makes it like, oh, exotic's the most common shit.
Like it's in everything. So everything's exotic. Wait a second. We've lost.
Yeah, we've just circled the wagons back.
It's
to
hype, dude. It is
exotic
hype.
a
It's just
bullshit
hype.
word to
We're
use to
chasing
begin
our
with.
own tail at this point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I want to
so-
say this. I want to say that this paper got a lot of traction, which is one of the reasons why I suggested it. And I think this is a really fantastic example, like we pointed out in the beginning, that like if something looks cool and all of this sort of thing, then it's more likely people will talk about it, of course. But I think this is the first, in all of the various comments that I've seen blowing this paper up on social media, I think Dr. Coco, your point is the first one that I saw where somebody's actually being like critical, not in a poor way, but in actually critically looking at the terminology being used there.
Yeah.
Whereas other people were just happy that something other than terpenes were being mentioned, which is fine.
I am too.
but-
Yeah, I think this is interesting. So I didn't want to. I don't want to just be critical, but it's important to still be like, okay, where'd they get this data? What are we really kind of analyzing here? But I think
All right.
I thought it was really interesting. I liked it, and I would encourage sort of more research in this area. I think I learned something from going through that article.
I have a question. Now, for certain studies that are published, it's because just research alone. Certain studies are published because perhaps an ulterior motive. Is there any benefit to the more clicks you get on a study? Like, is it a
Depends on
goal
why you're
to have
publishing
more?
it.
Where it's published, you can sell advertisement against the journal. That's how they make money. How many subscriptions they
Okay.
sell to journal websites. The more popular
Whether
it
it's
gets,
going to
the
get
better.
accepted at all, journal editors want articles that are going to get clicks and read for sure. Yeah, like,
You
For
could also
sure, and how you
pay to
title it.
get in. I know that.
it's like the whole publish or perish thing. If you publish and no one reads it, then you're basically not publishing. You have to publish something that people actually want to click on, read, and consume.
And cite.
What
And
they
cite,
really want
and
is
then
that
use it for further.
they want to be
right.
cited. That's what they want.
They get, I
There
think,
you
certain
go.
benefits from being cited, if I'm not mistaken, but it's just getting your research out there. And then
So
it becomes,
it depends on in how competitive of a university you are too, sort of what type of expectations you have. Grad students want to get research published so that they can get a job when they finish grad school.
Or have it on their resume.
Junior faculty often need to get stuff published, you know, in really competitive schools, or if you're in a really elite research institution, you're going to need to get published and cited and sort of a lot of other things. In a lot of cases, you know, on the academic side, it's about being published in semi-reputable journals or reputable journals. You know, I think more when they're looking for clicks, that's more towards the commercial paper, the white paper side of things, when they're doing research related to, you know, specific companies
products.
or specific products or specific industries.
Right.
And you are right that there is such thing as like a publishing fee. I know Nature recently got mollywopped for increasing it kind of substantially. I think that recently happened. At least I saw it on Science Twitter, which of course means it's true.
absolutely. But
So-
I will say, Doc, I don't think it was like you were poo-pooing the article. I think you were just pointing out misconceptions that commonly came across when you look at those images. I felt what you said was true about it looks like this was done with a scale of like there's 5% of some
Right.
garlic compound. So that got tested as higher because they tested it in a lab. And so this one is at this amount. It was just like, oh, this smells really garlicky, like super garlicky. So that one got a higher score because the person happened to say super or like really
Right.
fucking garlicky or like, and there's a list of all the descriptor words that were like amplified, you know, and that's how any of us talk when we smell something that's like really potent. We'll usually give it some sort of, you know, adjective or
Throw that fucking in
descriptor.
there.
Yeah.
Fucking good.
Real fucking
And I
good.
think that's good data when somebody says it's really garlicky. Okay, that's really good garlicky. Yeah, my issue is like, okay, why are we trying to plot that as like a number on some, you know, or on that? And I think that's
Yeah,
where
but, like that's subjective too.
They got us talking about it. That's why.
yeah.
Isn't there a way? There you go. Isn't there a way like we could? They do the chrome whatever test that they do to know what cannabinoids are there. They can't they do that with the
Yeah.
with the terpenes? and the-
HPLC or, you know,
Yeah,
high
But we
pressure
won't-
liquid chromatography, gas
But our
chromatography.
noses aren't that. Yeah,
Oh, I guess the
exactly.
thing
But
can't-
those aren't
right.
along the horizontal axis there. Those
can't tell
aren't
it.
specific chemical compounds. Those
Right.
are perceptions of flavors or
combination.
smells or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and they're not saying, you know, we found this much of this compound like you see on the chemical assays. But it looks a lot like that. And it's just too much overlap there that I think, yeah, Jack got the impression that potentially the authors were going for, which was to give you the idea that this data is sort of more solid than it is. But I mean, I don't know. I think the qualitative data is pretty solid. It just needs to be handled differently.
Well, and it's important to recognize this is sort of early research in terms of, even though I'll show some stuff that I found from a decade ago in the cannabis space. I'm complaining and sort of standing on my soapbox talking about these other non-terpenoid things like esters and posting about them on my Instagram, trying to make people more aware, because the more we know, then the better educated we can be. Because when you get a purple punch, terpene test back and nothing in there shows up as like really grapey, but all you can smell is like super candy grapey on that purple punch flower. You're like, what the fuck is going on? You need to dive deeper into it. And that's what drove me. It was a velvet punch, spiked punch from my buddy Doja DNA. I grew them and I was like, this tastes so much like the grape Smarties. It has to be the same chemical. I've had it so many times in my life. I knew it. I was like, what is the grape flavor in Smarties? Oh, methylanthranolate. Then I Googled cannabis aromas and methylanthranolate and found a study with like drug dogs smelling it through a bag. One of the top aromas was methylanthranolate in the top 10. So terpenes were only like 2 of the top 10. And that is what opened my mind. I was like, holy shit, there's so much more to this. And then when I found out it was an ester, I just typed in like list of esters, and then you can go through and I'll be able to show kind of like my little thought process here with the Instagram, but it's we can almost be our own little citizen scientists and researchers, and maybe work in correspondence with some of these labs in the future. As you know, you could volunteer yourself as like a cannabis expert or something like that, or if you live near somewhere, or if
Be
you know
one of
somebody
those
in
seven
that.
that gets the samples that has to describe the experience of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like this research. I think it's opening up new areas. I think more research in this area needs to be done, so we'd have a better idea. I think Spartan brings up an interesting question that we never really know how to, like, what we want in the final product, and how to preserve it and keep it as part of the final product. So that's another interesting question for making concentrates.
Matthew, is there anything else in this article that you wanted to touch on before we wrap it up?
Nope.
We're pretty deep into the show at this point. Jeez, I just
Yeah,
looked at
Spartan
the
Grown is
clock.
about
We
to
got
have
like
to
4 minutes
sign
until
off.
we have to kick Spartan. I mean, say goodbye to Spartan.
I gotta make sure this guy's bladder doesn't bust. He's like a 4-hour marathon, man. I don't want him to get like
I don't know how he does that. I'd take like half an hour after getting out this show, just to like relax and like, okay, I'm tired. Spartan goes for another 2 hours. So it's props, Spartan.
Hey, thanks, man. I don't know. It's just, I'm addicted to it now, I think. It's just a thing that I love to do. So I don't know.
I love to do it too.
Yes.
Yeah, 2 hours is enough in one sitting for me.
passion and good cannabis keeps him going. I think he's fueled with
Exactly.
lots of good stuff.
Exactly. I always got some good weed within reach. So that always helps me power through.
I'm going to share my screen and show something that I referenced earlier in the night. This is from the Codex on the Breeders Syndicate. Somebody sent this to me named Will. That's what they asked me to refer to them as. So thank you, Will, for sharing this with me. I thought it was pretty cool. And I will say, like anything, a lot of the stuff with cannabis research, it's tough to be perfect with all the strains and history. You might disagree with some of the stuff you find on here, but like, I think it's nice, just sort of like, we were talking about like repositories of cannabis and different strains. You can scroll through and look. This is sort of like 50 strains of green style. You can look up the strain, the different nicknames for it, its children, aliases, parents, like ChemDog, for example, being spelled DAWG, even though it's actually DOG from the breeder themselves. Popular people who hold it, year of origin stories, and then like this is sort of Phylos-esque, which I was a little bit impressed with. I like seeing these little breakdowns of like, here's the 91 ChemDog, and then it, you know, parent was dog bud, whatever, and you just get your little family trees. And it's nice just to have a third option out there that's not just Leafly and whatever. So it's a third option out there for people, as and a fourth being seedfinder.eu. There's not like that visualizations, and that's more like a Wikipedia. I could go on there tonight and say I bred Purple Punch, even though, you know, it wasn't me, it was Supernova Gardens, and a bunch of people say, oh, we sell Purple Punch, so Barney's Farm made Purple Punch, right? No, it's like they just fucking stole the name and sell it like they do with a shit ton of other strains. So something to look out for and to be aware of. But there are some of these things that have, I think, pretty solid information out there, so worth sharing. And shout out to Will for sharing that with me. And I guess while Spartan's here, this is going to be quick, but it's just a THC farmer article I'll scroll through that has kind of led me down a lot of good paths that I think is worth sharing. Shout out to C4 for posting this back in November 23rd of 2014. They were talking about terpenes, and they sort of do what the research article was being a little bit critical of, and over value everything to just being terpenes, because a lot of these are actually esters. But it says the terpenes of cannabis and their effects. They talk about the Swiss scientist who goes through figuring out CB2 receptor was impacted by beta-caryophyllene. A lot of cool stuff. This is something that you guys can look at more on your own time. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but you've got the different cannabinoid compounds listed here. And then terpenes, they start to list all this different stuff. And there's actually mercaptans in here, esters in here. And like, this is what I was talking about earlier, like methylthiobutyrate and things like that. There's so many, not all these are terpenes, but there's a ton of stuff that has been linked to being found in cannabis. And when I cross-reference it with other research, it's been very reliable. They actually, at the very bottom, there are some of these mercaptans that we were talking about earlier that were also cited in the research article that we discussed earlier. But let me get down to the very bottom. It's super long. Like they do have terpenes, and then they show the greenhouse seeds terpene wheel, which is a pretty interesting, kind of similar. You know, they've got sour, bitter, spicy, sweet, an attempt to break down aroma into different categorizations specific to cannabis. Talking about the entourage effects, they quote Ethan Russo's paper that was in the British Journal of Pharmacology. Then marijuana and cannabinoids, this person's name, I'm not going to butcher it, but School of Pharmacy. This link doesn't work, unfortunately, at University of Mississippi. I tried to click on this and it didn't work. And then Terpenoids for Medicine by Justin F. from, I think it's Leiden University. And let me pull my browser somewhere so I can click the actual thing here. So this is that 2013 research doctoral thesis, and it's on a open project or open platform. So I'll share this link in our chat afterwards. You can actually go through their doctoral thesis, which I am personally a fan of, having people share this kind of work. They put a ton of work into it, and really cool and interesting stuff. But with all that said, I went a little bit over Spartan Grown's time, so I want to pass it to Spartan for his final thoughts and shout outs this evening before he gets running on over to Michigan Bros Grow Show.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, everybody. Of course, it's always great to hang out with everybody on the show. So shout out to the panel first and foremost, and shout out to Chad as well. But just a little reminder out there for a lot of people. I'm getting a lot of questions recently just about it's getting close to harvest for a lot of people with their outdoor plants. And if you're running into any of these late season powdery mildew, or man, I kind of recommend it for most any outdoor harvest, is some sort of a bud wash. It's not super popular with a lot of people and they're scared about it. But if you do a bud wash and you see what the water looks like afterwards, and you smoke the plant afterwards and you realize it tastes just the same or better, and you see all the crap floating in that water, you're glad that you did it, I think. So look into a bud wash if you're an outdoor grower and you're getting ready to harvest soon, especially if you're running into any kind of a fungus issue. You know, protect yourself.
Just like cool water, lemon juice, simple. Or
I like just a 30% peroxide, man. 30% peroxide or something like that. You get at the grocery store, mix it, dilute it in water.
How much do you dilute it?
Let me see. I got
Like
it.
a lot, right? You're just like
Yeah.
30% peroxide. Okay.
Hold on,
You're not dipping the buds in 30% peroxide.
Okay. No. I would do like 10 mils, 10 mils per gallon.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
30 mil. Yep. And dunk in that, and then have like just fresh water after that to dunk in after that, and then good. At least that'll zap a lot of your fungi and make it a healthy smoke for you. Otherwise, just keep growing, everybody, and then you'll see you in about 12 minutes or so over at the Michigan Bros Grow Show.
Peace out, Spartan.
Together.
Later, man.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that because I never thought about it until one day I walked out to my plants out in the woods there, and I saw a pile of bird shit on the leaf, and I was like, yeah, that's not good. And so I agree that a little rinse off. And the one time I harvested, it was downpouring rain, so I kind of like, you could probably wash it a little bit while it's standing, but yeah, do that. At first I was adverse to thinking about it, but if you just do it with just water or just a little bit of the hydrogen peroxide, I wouldn't be putting nothing else in it personally, but definitely rinse it off. It doesn't hurt. And I've heard multiple people that have been doing it, growing and harvesting and not doing it for a long, long time. And in particular, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, Smiley's Garden one time did it and didn't tell his patients. And they all came back and said, like, did you do something different? This is like way smoother and more flavorful smoke. So after that, he was convinced that it was a good practice to continue doing. So I concur.
Yeah, his situation is sort of a hybrid indoor-outdoor where it's not perfectly sealed. So he is exposed to the elements like an outdoor grow would be, and he does do some outdoor growing as well. So I'm not absolutely opposed to it. We wash a lot of other vegetable produce and fruit that we eat and consume. So if you're going to smoke something, a lot of the videos I've seen of people doing it, you can see like dust, dirt, bugs, and other things floating in the wash water. And they I'll see like 3 5-gallon buckets. Sometimes it's like
Yeah.
you've got your solution, and you've got like a milder solution, and then like a fresh water or something like that, or like a solution. And then the, like one I saw, I think it was like lemon juice and baking soda, maybe, but don't quote me on that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think that's a Jorge
Or,
Cervantes
yeah,
type.
yeah.
But and then it goes into the like, cool water, not ice cold, not hot. Obviously, you want it to be like cool, so you're not making ice water hash kind of with your buds as
Right.
you're washing them.
Yeah, not so cold that you're freezing anything off of the plant.
And don't
I
shake
think
crazy
that's why
hard.
most people don't do it. And I'll also just say we're talking primarily about outdoor growers here.
Yeah.
There's much less reason to do this in an indoor grow, although sometimes there's a reason to.
Mhm.
But I think people are scared to like dunk their plants underwater. I mean, it
When you
just
want to
seems
dry
like-
them out. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the wrong thing to be doing. Like I'm supposed to keep this stuff dry and not let it get too wet, and it's gonna get moldy. So I think that those concerns can kind of be laid to rest. You're not leaving it in the water. You're not even sort of leaving it wet for very long. It dries off the surface pretty quickly.
Well, and Kyle Breeder even did like what he called water curing, where he like left it literally in a jar for
Mhm.
like a night in like a fridge, poured it off, did it again. And he said it was like he did it too many times. It was like the smoothest smoke ever, but it had no flavor. He had like lost all the flavor, but it was like
Mhm.
super smooth. So I'm like, okay, that's definitely not a solution that I'm ever going to try.
Well,
Right,
people are-
because some of these volatile organic compounds are going to wash away in that water too. See, that's the other sort of side of it, I suppose.
Well, I ain't gonna wash off if you just dunk it once and then hang it to dry.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
But
I would actually argue
know what
that if you
always-
tested that water tower, I would almost bet you a percentage of it
something.
is going to be
Oh, yeah,
terpenes and
of course.
volatile.
Right, but not
It's just
enough
like
to
when
More.
you dry sift a bud, if you set your buds down on a trim tray, even if you just set it down gently and you pick it up and there's a parchment paper under there that was completely raw, just gently setting it down and picking it up, you'll pull it out and then you'll take a card and you can swipe it all around and you'll have a nice little line of keef.
Oh, yeah,
Trichomes are so sensitive. They fly off really easy. And
when it's dry.
yeah.
More.
yeah.
But you know what always disgusted me when I made my butter all the time? That sediment at the bottom, like I know we boil it, but I don't know where that
You don't
material
eat
comes
that part,
from. It's
Tal.
like,
You throw that part
I
away.
don't eat that. I don't know, but what is it? Like the sediment.
It's the nasty part.
It's the nasty. Where does that come from? Because even
Some
inside,
some of it comes
What?
from the plant itself, just sort of the organic matter in the plant. I mean, a lot of it does.
from boiling out. Yeah.
And the cooking
there's some
process
other
doesn't do
nasty
like
stuff in there.
nice
I
things
see,
to the
yeah.
fats and the interiors of whatever makes up the cell walls and things of the plant.
Right.
I wanted to do a quick, we were talking about how these scientists are categorizing it, and I'll show you guys the Jack Greenstock amateur, not biologist, not chemist methodologies of just smoking a lot of weed, smelling a lot of weed, and then being like, this one smells like something. So if you ever go to my page, I have all these saved stories. And the first one I did was the grape smell. And I've gone through these probably a bunch of times, but anybody out there can do this kind of stuff with their own research. The rabbit hole is, I just call this topic artificial grape smell. And let me see if I can click this, if it'll go through or quicker. There we go. Okay. Methylanthranolate essentially, but then like we'll go over to pineapple because I've covered this one a bunch of times. And I think this one I actually go into the ester chart, just showing that I found cannabis that had basically pineapple smell. And then I looked up the terpene profile and I was dissatisfied because careine, pinene, linalool, myrcene, limonene a little bit. I mean, citrus, there's some citrus smells in pineapple for sure. But camphene, none of these other ones smell anything remotely like pineapple. So I was like, what's going on? There's got to be more to it. And then I found this article. I think this was a Leafly article. I could be wrong. And this is that thing that I was talking about earlier, the ester chart. Because when you just type in esters and their smells, like you've got all these different ones, but pineapple shows up in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different options. And then I just went through to see which of those are found in cannabis. It's like, it could be that simple. And like you see these same types of diagrams that we were seeing in that scientific research article, just showing the chemical formula essentially. Here's a cannabis concentrate that has the chemical, and then another chemical from pineapple that I found earlier. But you can do this with so many different things. Strawberry. I wasn't finding strawberry in terpenes. And then you go through esters, there's different esters in there. And like there's so many different aromas that you can go through and just figure it out on your own. You don't need to have some grand scientific funding. Oftentimes there's other research that's been done for food or on cannabis for like busting illicit samples and things like that, or just because the legal market's been around long enough now, we're starting to see more cannabis tested, and we start to see, this is that article I was talking about with the drug dogs where they smelled the top 10 aromas through plastic bag, and benzaldehyde was number one, which is part of the cherry smell of cannabis that never gets talked about. Nobody's like, oh, I got that benzaldehyde terp profile.
No.
It's like it's very under talked about, but it's the number one thing that smells through the bag. Then myrcene is number two. That's a terpene. Decanol, heptanol, methylanthranilate, which that's the grape I talked about earlier. Octanol, hexanol. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that.
A bunch of
Ketone.
alcohols.
This one's a ketone, and then
ketones.
you've got linalool. So 3 terpenes in the top 10, or 4. So 4 out of 10 were terpenes, but that just means that like only 40% of the top 10 things that smell through the bag were actually terpenes. And banana is another one that I've covered. Garlic is another one that I've covered. Blueberry is another one that I've covered. So it's just for anybody out there, if you're interested in doing this stuff on your own, if you find a strain that's interesting that you enjoy, you can find research out there. Just Google Scholar and start typing in the words that you find, and hopefully we can get it into the sort of lexicon of cannabis users and growers, because then we can start to select for this stuff. We don't need like a terpene test that's going to say, oh, this doesn't have grape, so I'm going to pick away from it because the thing that I thought was grape is not actually what I should be looking for. Maybe it's methylanthranilate that you're looking for, or maybe there's other types of like grapey smells that you want to pick for, but don't narrow your mind to just terpenes. I think that the article did a good job of showing that it's about more than just terpenes, and that's a beautiful thing in cannabis. There's hundreds of different phytochemicals that we can enjoy, from the cannabinoids to the terpenes and esters, aldehydes, ketones, etc. But with all that said, it's been a fun night talking science. I like this kind of stuff. I know it's not for everybody, but we do it every once in a while, and it was a great time. So I'm going to pass it first to Dr. MJ for final thoughts and shout outs.
Absolutely, guys. I had a lot of fun on today's show. Good articles. I like it when we finally come up with articles that we can sort of, throw some praise at instead of just kind of tearing them apart. Thank you, Matthew, for walking us through those. You always do a great job with that. The rest of the panelists and everybody in chat for keeping things interesting. I'm Dr. MJ Coco. Check out my YouTube channel. Check out cocoforcannabis.com. And yeah, we're doing the Grower Love giveaway on the deals and discounts page, and getting geared up for the New Year's Grow Challenge. We're bringing back the New Year's Grow Challenge in January. So get your grow calendars, start getting your grow calendars lined up to grow with us on January 1st. And Grow Love, everyone.
Grow Love for sure. Next up, we got Matthew Gates.
Yeah, this was a cool topic. I find this kind of stuff really interesting because it gets to some of the fuzzy aspects of human experience, like flavors and tastes and color and that kind of stuff. And I have my budworm video is out on my YouTube channel. I just published it a little bit before this live stream, so you can check that out at Zenthanol on the YouTube. And also you can check me out at zenthanol.com for professional inquiries, of course. I'll be trying to make more research update videos. This one's a very short one. I challenge myself to make something that's passable, but quick and easy to get, like my pest primer videos. So if you're interested in that, check me out on YouTube if you haven't already. And I also want to say that the aroma thing is really interesting for insects too. And I'll probably make a video about that as well, about the ratios of compounds that attract them or repel them.
That's fascinating. That's actually what got my initial interest into the terpenes when I first started researching the aromas of cannabis and things like that. So really cool interactions there. And it can be nature's repellent or attractant, depending on which bug. And we've got Noah the Grower, who it looks like he turned his camera, but it isn't snapping over to the side quite yet. So you can maybe just hold it regular style.
Yeah, totally.
And I'll spotlight it up and down because it's still looking killer.
I was running a little low, so I had to snip off a couple ounces off of these two last night. But I'm Noah the Grower, and I had a great time.
You were running low on your stash, so you just went and harvested some? Is that what you just said?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And
I love that. I love that.
And this right here, I'm like day 63, 64, but it's just that, it's still
You're like,
going,
you look good
so-
enough. You're coming next. Come with me.
yeah. So you know how it goes.
I
I'm
know
short.
exactly how it goes.
You got to do what you got to do, man. Hey, I'm not going to the store.
You'll have a little ready, man. You're gonna be ready for it. That's,
That's
you
awesome.
gave yourself enough time to
Yeah, hell
dry
yeah.
while you're killing all the rest of the stuff. That'll be curing up nice, and you'll, even if it's, you said all the time you like it a little fresh, so nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sorry I was late today, but I had a good time listening to everybody, and I'll see everybody next week.
Cheers, Noah. Thanks for showing off the garden,
Cheers.
even if it's for a little bit there at the end. Always great to see it. And last and certainly not least, at the 6 o'clock hour on the West Coast, our final panelist of the evening, the American one.
Did you skip Matthew or did I miss him?
Didn't I? Maybe I didn't pass it to Matthew. Matthew Gates. No,
Yeah,
I
I
passed
got
it to
it.
him for sure. He
right.
went down the whole thing.
All right, good. My weed's still good, thank God. All right, so
Weed's still good, Tal.
I got it. The question of saturation has been bothering me since I started making my butter, and I want the world to come to the conclusion for me because I can't figure it out. Is there too much cannabis that I could put into my butter making process where it gets saturated out and falls out, like Matthew pointed out in chat, that there is an oversaturation of everything when you mix So I wonder what that point is and if I'm wasting or if I can make it even better. So I'll throw that out there.
I've
as
thought
my
about
final
that so many
thought.
times when I'm making butter. I'm like, should I put more butter? And almost
Right,
always when I'm then
right.
cooking with the butter
Yeah.
later, I cut it with like regular butter.
Regular
because
butter, yeah.
It'll be too strong otherwise.
Mhm.
So like, should I
Yeah.
have just used more butter in the first place when I was making this? That's a real question. And I don't
But-
really know what the downside to using more butter is, other than it would be like not as strong, I
Oh,
guess.
right. I like it having potent. Then I add like 1 ounce of regular butter sometimes. And sometimes I think, because I'm using coconut oil, maybe the butter adds a little something to the cooking part of it. But
Maybe it, like
Mike,
binds in a
always
weird
make
way
me
or
happy.
something.
Sorry, Matthew. What was that?
Oh no, I was saying maybe it binds in some weird way or something. I liked your question about that too,
Right.
because also
Yeah.
you're gonna have different compounds that will have different saturation
Elements,
points.
yeah.
So you're never gonna
Yeah.
have a perfect, yeah.
Very interesting to me. Yeah. So that's my question and my final thought. And thanks everyone for hanging out. It's great to see everybody. Yeah, because I've been busy and out of the loop with a lot of my regular hangouts, and it's always good to be here. And yeah, so everyone have a
Well,
great week. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, man.
I
man.
legitimately mean it when I say we're always happy to have you. It's a pleasure. I love the experience you bring to the table. And when you have the time, you're always welcome. Even if you come late or even just for a little bit, I feel that way about you and everybody on the panel. It's a great time hanging out with you all. I learned a lot tonight with these different scientific articles. None of them are ever going to be perfect. I felt like these were some of the better ones we've reviewed as of late. They were interesting for a lot of different reasons. And I think that some of those researchers, you might want to email them about some of your questions, like how much
they
cannabis
would
can
tell
go
you.
in my butter, because they're the people, they're literally like looking at how much of this oil is being taken up into people's
Great
bloodstream.
point. Yeah.
And you're talking about how much concentration you can get into a lipid. They're like the research group that you want to get linked up with. So hopefully they will respond and maybe they'll consider it for future research. And the THC question, like I talked about, we have a rat model. Let's get a human model with all these oils, but
Yeah,
plus
I
butter,
volunteer.
plus
I
ghee,
volunteer.
plus, whatever. Yeah. I volunteer as tribute. I will be the test the dummy. Funny enough, there was a few things like that here in San Diego that I almost did volunteer for, like cannabis breathalyzers, like to test how effective
Oh,
they
but
would
then you're
be.
like, oh, I'm supporting that. So
I don't want to contribute to that
Yeah.
cause, so I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I'll pass. But then at the same time, I was like, what if I can get really fucking stoned and drive perfectly, and then
Oh, yeah.
negate all their fucking tests? What if I'm
Yeah,
they just be
you
like,
can
you're
be
an
our
outlier.
champion.
Your fucking reaction time's too good. And
Right.
you're driving too well on being way too high. Like say like, oh, I'm not a heavy user, and then go in and like take their high dose and like drive
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah, I'm a light user, and then
Well, we
Yeah,
take the top
Game
off
the
and
data a
bottom
little bit in
off.
our direction for once. Who knows? The lobbyists have done it the opposite way for years and years. But with that said, I'm Jack Greenstock. We have fun over here talking science, talking a little bit of politics, culture, and cannabis. Sometimes we talk about growing, but you can find me Jack_Greenstock on X, which used to be called Twitter. That's where I do most of my posting about cannabis these days. And my website is 50strains.com. You can go to 50strains.com to see all the stuff that I have there if you want to check that out. But it's been a fun one. And I will let you all go because Michigan Bros Grow Show has been on for about 5 minutes. If you're looking for more cannabis content, go check them out. Great group. Spartan Grown will be there. So have fun, everybody. And we'll catch you all next week. Grow love. Keep on growing.
Grow or love, everyone.
Keep growing.